Good day, good night, good anything in between. My name is Cornelia Grace, and I'm here with my co host Charlotte, and together we are Literary Ramblings. So this month we read the book Papillon, which was Charlotte's choice.
Yeah.
Charlotte, why did you pick this?
Me and Cornelia were actually in the same place last fall, and we were looking at books, and I was like, I kind of want to pick one that we can read and just hand it over right now. And the cover caught my eye because it has a butterfly and Rami Malek on the front. And I was like, sold. Yeah. And
Plus,
also,
it's only $3.
yeah, it was only $3, and I have a thing for prison stuff, I guess. I mean, I don't know about a thing, but like I'm interested in it. Like I
Hmm.
have watched a lot of things about prisons, and I haven't read as many books about prisons, but like The Man in the Iron Mask is one of my favorites. It's you could draw some similarities almost because it's also about a French prison, but
Yeah. So as Charlotte kind of mentioned, I thought that I would be better at doing introductions by now, but I'm not because I thought about this all day and I was like, oh, okay, so I'm gonna do the intro and then I'm gonna say like, oh, we should, shoot the breeze for a second and, just chat for a minute. And I never do it. Like it happens and I say the intro and then I'm immediately like, we read books and then we go on.
yep, you're like, what was it? Why did you pick this book? And I'm like, oh, okay, we're going right into it.
Yeah, well, cause my brain goes just blank. So, I mean, I guess we should I don't know.
Why are you
I'm so
crumbling
bad.
right now?
I don't know because I want to try to talk about something else that's not the book for a couple minutes, just to like get into the groove. But I can't think of anything to talk about. Oh, how about reading styles? Because I just wrote a blog post about different reading styles, and I split everybody into two categories. You're either a sprinter or you're a walker, and I am a sprinter, and Charlotte is not,
Yep. I
which
mean,
really helps her with nonfiction, and I tend to struggle with nonfiction just in general, which I talked about in our podcast about the story of English that I technically never even finished because it was nonfiction and I didn't like it.
yeah, and I would say that was partially inspired by this book, right? Because this is kind of cementing the idea that we have such different reading styles.
Yes, we do. I had to buy the audiobook for Papillon because I couldn't get through it fast enough.
And
So that was definitely a problem.
she got a hands up, a hand up from the pronunciation from listening to the audiobook as well. Whereas I was like,
Yes.
I don't know any French.
Yeah, a lot of this book is, well, not a lot of this book is French. There are a lot of French words in this book because Henri is French. And so that's his native language. So this was translated. Still leave a lot of French words in here,
Hmm.
and I did have a hand up because I took French in high school, and the only thing I remembered about that class is some of the pronunciations.
Yeah. So it was. Do you feel like you can still sprint in an audiobook? Because I was thinking about that.
Yes, because I listened to it at 1.5 speed,
Oh, clever.
which is a lovely option. It depends on how it's read,
Hmm.
but I rarely listen to an audiobook on regular speed anymore. Like obviously when I listened to audiobooks as like a teen when you just had like the CDs, I
Yeah.
couldn't make it any faster, which was kind of annoying sometimes. But now that I get them just digitally, I can listen to them at lots of different speeds. So one audiobook app that I was using for a little while, it just went you could listen at one time speed 0.5 to 2.5, etc. up. But then on Google Playbooks, I can listen to it at 1.1 speed and 1.2 and 1.3 and 1.4. It goes up
Wow.
by like ones. And I'm like, this is awesome because I think I listened I think 1.5 was a little bit too fast, but 1.2
Mm,
was slightly slow. So I think I listened to it like 1.3.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it depends on, but it does really depend on how the audiobook is being read because some audiobooks have a lot of pauses in them and just a lot of dead air.
Mhm.
And it's just left there for like dramatic effect and all of that. But for me, I don't necessarily like having that all the time.
Yeah.
So if I can listen to it just a little bit faster, it's nicer.
Yeah. I feel like I am a walker for the most part, but it definitely depends on the book. Because I agree that when we read nonfiction, it's been like perfect for that pace of, you
Hmm.
know, maybe a chapter a day or a couple chapters, around like 30 to 40 pages, not more than that.
Yeah.
Whereas definitely when we've read some books that are more like thrillers or suspense, I've definitely felt the urge to sit down and read a lot more in a big chunk.
Yeah.
But I rarely do audiobooks. I actually am listening to an audiobook right now for the first time in probably at least a year. So,
Hmm.
because I got gifted some CDs by Janet Ivanovich, and
Janet
yeah,
Ivanovich herself gifted them to you?
no, no, the CDs are, I should say, they're her books.
Oh, okay.
And whoever is reading this one is honestly doing a great job. Like she did different voices for all the characters, and I'm
Uh-huh.
pretty impressed. So,
That is always nice because one downside to the audiobook for Papillon is that he doesn't change his voice that much for
oh,
the different people. So it was a little more difficult to tell who was talking all the
mm-hmm,
just because he read it pretty much the same the whole time. But then like I tried to listen to an audiobook of a book. I had read the first book in the series and I was like, "Oh, they have the whole series on audio, so I'm going to listen to the first one again because it's short and then go from there." And the voice that the voice actor used for one of the main characters, I could not stand it. He
mm,
basically said like three sentences and I was like, "I'm done. I can't listen to this." Which sort of sucks. That's
yeah,
probably what sucks most about audiobooks is that if you listen to part of it and you don't like the voice actor or you don't like how they say something, you pretty much just can't read it.
yeah.
Or at least I can't read it. Just done.
That's,
It's it's very frustrating because audiobooks are a lot faster to get through in my opinion,
yeah.
especially when you can listen to them faster than one time speed.
Mm-hmm,
So it makes it a little more difficult to get through that. But I definitely paid a lot of money for Papillon because I don't have like a free service anymore for
mm-hmm,
audiobooks. And audiobooks are expensive.
yeah.
I wish it had been cheaper because I probably won't listen to it again.
Yeah, I
All
mean it's a
right.
long book too.
Yeah, it is. It's like 500 pages. Over
Yeah.
500 pages. All right, Charlotte.
Should I read
How
the
do we want
back?
to do this? Sure, you can read the back.
I mean that's what we were doing. So
When are we following ourselves on anything in this at all?
we're trying to be some form of consistent here, but it's a struggle.
It is.
So and also please forgive my pronunciations in particular, which are going to be worse than Corey's, I feel.
Yeah, pronunciations will definitely not be perfect, but I'm better at pronouncing things than Charlotte is just in general. So there's
Yeah,
that.
there's some kind of disconnect in my brain that is like, you don't need to say it the same way twice. So here's the summary. Henri Charrière, known as Papillon, for the butterfly tattoo on his chest, was convicted in Paris in 1931 of a murder he did not commit. Sentenced to life imprisonment in the penal colony of French Guiana, he became obsessed with one goal: escape. After planning and executing a series of treacherous yet failed attempts over many years, he was eventually sent to the notorious prison Devil's Island, a place from which no one had ever escaped, until Papillon. His flight to freedom remains one of the most incredible feats of human cunning, will, and endurance ever undertaken. Charrier's astonishing autobiography, Papillon, was published in France to instant acclaim in 1968, more than 20 years after his final escape. Since then, it has become a treasured classic, the gripping, shocking, ultimately uplifting odyssey of an innocent man who would not be defeated. Also, it notes that he died in 1973, which you will realize is only a few years after this book was published. So,
Yes, I actually just realized that because I couldn't remember when this book was actually published.
yeah, kind of sad.
I
Especially
mean,
because basically there's some debate about the validity of this book and how like true it is, and the French government basically tried to kind of denounce it and be like, that's not how things were.
Yeah,
Um,
well, it looks really bad on the French government
yeah,
to have a penal colony on an island where everybody dies of dysentery and yellow fever. So
yeah,
it's a little
yeah, it does.
inhumane.
And also, I mean, it is it does feel like he definitely could have exaggerated some of this, but I would say
Hmm.
I don't feel like he could have made up all of it. And to say that he did it just for the money, but then he died a couple years later, like he was already, you know, fairly old, and I feel like it was kind of a risk for him to publish this to some extent. So,
Yeah. As far as like the has been quoted saying that it's about 75% true.
hmm,
And I was like, that seems totally fair
yeah,
with the idea that every single thing this person says is going to be 100.
yeah,
It has to do with the fact that you just it filters everything through their own biases and their
mhm,
own worldview. So, and they're not going to remember every single thing that happens
yeah,
to them, and they're not going to remember word for word every single thing that somebody says.
hmm,
So, I mean, you can have obviously very vivid memories of most of your life, but there's going to be things that you forget. And especially as someone who went through as much trauma as he
hmm,
did, I mean, I just don't know that I would trust him if he said that it was 100% true. If he
hmm,
like just came and was like, yeah, it's absolutely every single word is the gospel truth. And it's like,
hmm,
okay, I wouldn't do that either. But the
yeah,
fact that he says that, oh, it's like 75% true, I'm like, okay, that's about what I expected anyway.
hmm.
I
And
don't
I feel
know.
like
It's
we're
very epic. People like to aggrandize their own experiences as
yeah,
well. And
yeah,
people just naturally exaggerate too. I mean, I've listened to friends tell a story and I
hmm,
was there and they're telling the truth, but
hmm,
they're kind of like making it more exciting than it actually was
yeah,
and stuff like that. They're kind of stretching some parts, and I'm always like, that's fine. I mean, they're not outright
yeah,
lying. They're
hmm,
not like setting up the story in a way that makes them look like the savior of the whole world or anything. It's just, that's just how they experienced it. And the more you tell the story, the more it kind of changes a little bit. And it's not necessarily wrong. It's just
yeah.
that's how it is.
Everyone
So
wants to
that's how I
have.
went into the story. So I didn't have a problem with it. When they said it was contested, when I learned that it was highly contested, I was like, that makes sense. Like, I don't care.
Yeah. I mean, everyone wants to have a good story is the ultimate, you know. And I feel like it's
Yes.
interesting because it feels like he was processing things while he wrote this. I mean, you can see a progression in the book of like how he felt early on in his imprisonment and how that changed.
Yes. Yeah,
I
I
think
agree with that too.
it's also kind of fascinating because he is a criminal, but he never talks about his actual criminal past. He just maintains his innocence for the murder that he was convicted on, and then
Yes.
says that he
I
was a criminal.
I
So,
actually like loved that as an attitude that he had because I was like, he does not dwell on the fact that he's innocent of the crime that put him in prison. He
no.
does not think about it, which is something that struck me at the very beginning. He starts off with the trial
Mhm.
and then it goes on obviously, but when he's found guilty, he's like really mad about it, but he's
Mhm.
not mad because he was found guilty, and
Yeah.
he's not mad because he's innocent of the particular crime that he was found guilty of. And I was like, yeah, because somewhere in the back of his mind he knows that he's a criminal. So it's like it's
Mhm.
funny because he's allegedly innocent of this murder, but he's still very guilty of like a lot of other crimes.
Yeah. Of
So it's
like,
like he's justifiably imprisoned, but it's just
mhm.
not for the thing that they got him for.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is a weird situation from that perspective. And he also talks about wanting to get revenge, but then he's very like specific that he wants to get revenge on the prosecutor and not so much the jury. Like he feels like the jury just didn't know what was happening.
Yeah,
He also called them cheeseheads, which I thought was really funny. Shout out Wisconsin. Sorry, it was an
I
insult to
guess.
France, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he lets go of the revenge idea not that long into everything, I feel like.
Well, it's still kind of like he brings it up a few times, but it's more like a back of the mind kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's less of a that's not. I wouldn't say reading this that revenge was 100% what drove him
Yeah.
and what kept going, because he didn't hold on to that idea in that way.
Mm-hmm.
What he held on to was this idea of escape, which
Mm-hmm.
is wild because he
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily talk about anything that he has to escape for
Mm-hmm.
throughout this. And it's always, he's a very interesting character.
Yeah.
He's a very interesting person. And to like see inside his head a little bit, a lot of things and the way that he thinks are like paradoxical. And it's it's just very interesting to see it like from his
Well,
perspective, because on one hand he'll be like, I want revenge, and then on the other hand he'll be like, I'm gonna escape and never re-enter society. And then sometimes he's like, I'm gonna escape and I'm gonna re-enter society and clear my name. And I'm like,
mm-hmm.
what do you what do you
Yeah.
actually like want? He doesn't hold on to like one
One.
idea. He like runs the
Yes.
gamut as to like the reasons why prisoners want to escape.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
And
never
the
because he's
interesting, yeah, it's not because he's innocent, and also he seems like a person who could have easily, like, he was thriving in prison. He had
hmm
connections. He was never that afraid for his life. I mean, when he was first starting out, maybe a little bit, but then he like makes some friends and is fine.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have like the motivation of like being persecuted, like say Andy Dufresne in Shawshank Redemption, you know.
Yeah.
But he still just really wants out of there. And like a lot of the prisoners he meets are just kind of accepting their fate,
Yeah.
but not him.
Yeah, he comes across a lot of people that also run the gamut as far as what they want. Like
Hmm.
there's a lot of prisoners who are like, I'm fine with this, I'll just serve out my life sentence. Some prisoners are like, I have made a good life for myself here and it's fine. I have a life sentence and that's cool. Some prisoners are like, yeah, I'd like to escape, but it is too much hassle to do that.
Yeah.
And some prisoners like they fear escape more than they fear being in the prison community.
Yeah, or being caught for
And
us.
yes, whereas Papillon does not care. He just keeps going. And he was all like relatively known before he went to prison, which is why he basically integrated fairly easily and made
Hmm.
friends pretty easily, because he was already known in the underworld, the French
Yeah,
underworld. Don't know why. He mentions being a safecracker twice, but
he
honestly,
does.
I wanted a lot more. I wanted to know what he did. Because he
Hmm.
also mentions, I meant to go back and look for the page where he mentions it, but he mentions a wife
He
waving him,
does. Nanette,
waving at
right?
him when they're going, I don't know. And then, but then he never talks about her again for the
Hmm.
entire book.
And it's almost
And
like
I had
she.
to do some digging.
Can I
He
give you
was
my theory
married.
first?
Okay, do it. Give me your
Okay, my
theory.
theory was that his wife didn't want to be in the book, because that was the only reason that I could think of that he would never mention her again, except at the very beginning. Was like that she was like, "Don't bring me into this."
No,
Ah.
he was married and he was divorced 2 years before he was arrested. 1 to 2
Oh,
years.
so she was ex-wife by then.
She was his ex-wife. But when you Google him, Google says he was only married once, and I cannot for the life of me remember. I went down a rabbit hole of many pages of Wikipedia and just random websites trying to find information about Henri Charrier, and it's actually kind of difficult to find anything like very specific. But I did find that, and so he was divorced from her. So Google says he was only married once, and that marriage happens after all of the ordeal and after he gets out of prison and he's pardoned.
Oh, in Venezuela?
So yes, he marries a Venezuelan. And
Interesting.
they have a kid together, and I guess they were happy enough together. So I don't know. I don't know why. It was very weird, and I started to think that maybe that was part of the part that was like a lie that was not quite
Mhm.
accurate.
Yeah.
Because one of the accusations about the book is that he took information that other prisoners gave him
Mm.
and used that and made it sound like he did it. And I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense. He goes through a lot, and by about a third of the way in, I was like, I don't know how he's still alive. So it does make
Yeah.
me. It did, like when I heard that, I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense that he might have integrated other prisoners' tales into his own. Because I was like, this is a lot to go through, and he
Well,
has a lot of moments where he's like, oh, I was really healthy, and I was like, you were not. You were not.
Not objectively, like maybe relative to
No.
other prisoners.
Yeah, relative to the literally starving and going madly insane prisoners, I was healthy. And I'm like, okay, good for you.
I mean,
Good.
in
Good job.
the book only takes place over what, like 10, 15 years? Less than that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that.
So it's not even that much of his life, really, and there's so much that happens. Although,
Yes,
to be fair, he skips all the boring parts. Like, he really does. He's
he
just
does.
like, and then we were there for several months, and then here's where the escape happened. Like, that's
Yes.
the format.
Yeah. He really, like, he does just gloss over a lot of things.
Did you find out what he died of, by the way?
Yeah, throat cancer,
That makes
which
sense.
makes
I was
sense
just,
because, yep,
he
I was,
smokes constantly,
yes,
and
just
also
constantly.
the amount of sunburn he gets in this, I was like, man, he's going to get cancer.
And he did. And he
Yep,
died.
sad.
Yeah, he was only 66 when he died, so he was not old, but
But I mean,
he
he had a,
spends a lot of times in a lot of prisons, and he tries to escape from places. He's always trying to get in the hospital
yep,
because it's
because that's the
easier to
easiest
escape from the
place.
hospital. Yep.
Hmm.
I thought his. So we have not talked about at all like the last half of the book
No.
because we just kind of like hit that milestone and then we were like, okay, and then I got the audiobook and I basically finished it in a couple of days.
Yeah, we just agreed to finish it this week. So
His stint in the mental hospital on the Salvation Islands was really weird.
very
But
weird.
one of my favorite parts of his story, just because it's so bizarre.
I
He tries to escape from there, and basically, like this other guy, an orderly, like helps him,
mhm
but they both crash back onto the island because of the bad seas,
mhm
waves, and then his partner dies. Like he
yeah
just never sees it, and he just sneaks back into asylum and just
mhm
goes back to his bed,
yep.
and then
And then
wakes up and pretends nothing happened.
a different orderly is like, I knew you were faking the whole time, but I figured I'd let you try.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? Also, can we just talk about the fact that at that mental institution they made all the prisoners go around just entirely naked
Yeah. There's
with
a lot
for
of
like no
nakedness
reason?
in this book. He spent like 8 of the 10 years just naked.
I mean, I guess, yeah.
For no reason. I
Yeah.
mean, you can't let them have certain things.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but they could have figured something else out. I don't know. That's just they don't want to spend any money on these people.
No. What always surprises me in prison stories, and I guess I don't know why it should surprise me, but like they're like, "Oh, I said I was sick, so they brought me to a doctor." And I was like, "Isn't this like a horrible penal colony? Like why would they bother with like
Uh, I
bringing a
mean, in
doctor?" I don't
solitary they
know.
did not.
No. Yeah, he was in solitary for 2 years, which is a really long time to be in solitary.
Yeah, and
Like a
he
really long time.
legitimately almost died
Yes,
because they were only feeding them. What were they feeding them, once or twice a day? Twice a
twice a
day, but
day.
they took that away because one of his friends was smuggling him extra food, and they found out, and then they were like, "Well, now you only get one meal a day."
Yeah.
So
And
he
like it's
almost
not like
starved
a
to death.
good meal or anything.
Oh, they all got
So.
scurvy.
Yeah. His like
Yep.
teeth were bleeding all the time and I was like, "How do you have teeth when you like
That's scurvy.
left this?"
Yeah. He doesn't talk about what kind of shape he was in. He doesn't go that much into detail about how anyone looks or anything in this book. That's the other
No.
kind of difficult part about it.
Yeah.
Like, all I knew about like his first two friends who he does the first escape with are that Maturette was young and apparently fairly pretty,
Yeah.
and I don't remember anything about Clouseau.
Yeah, Cluzio is just he broke his leg twice.
He broke his leg. That's his character.
Yeah, it really is. He doesn't spend a lot of time on that, which was fine because this would be like a 900-page book if he like, tried to actually describe things
Yeah.
in a less than sterile way, which is how most of this book reads, is that it's very
Very
matter
slow.
of fact.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that makes a lot of sense because he this is traumatizing. I mean, the
Yeah.
prisons and stuff that he went through are awful. And I don't think that he probably wanted to relive all of that as vividly as he could have. if he
I
had
mean,
decided to like actually sit down and describe these things. Because there are
yeah.
some really vivid descriptions at a few parts,
Hmm.
and they are extremely uncomfortable to
I
like
think the part that really
read
got
and
to
to
me
understand.
was when he was talking about how they don't even try to catch murderers of other prisoners. Like,
Yeah.
they literally don't care. They won't try to figure out who killed someone. They just dispose of the body and move on. And he was like,
Yes.
that's what they're imprisoned for, some of them. And then you get here and it's like, well, none of your lives matter anymore at all. Like, we're not even going to do a cursory investigation into how you died.
No, I think one time they got everybody together and they were like, "Hey, this guy was murdered tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Is anyone gonna like say anything about that?" Okay, carry
And that,
on. And
yeah,
that was
and
like
that was
it.
all they did. Yep. They were like,
It was like
that's
that was
it.
real danger of the prison because Papillon was in like a relatively safe position in prison.
Mm-hmm.
He was well known for his escapes and for being in the underworld, and then he had a lot of friends. But he's still like, even if somebody had come and like slit his throat, nothing would have happened.
Yeah,
It
the
would have
only
been up to his friends
justice
to avenge him.
exactly. The only justice you get is if the people you're friends with kill someone back for you, and that's terrible too.
Yeah, it's very
So
hollow.
he started out not being a murderer, but he does kill someone in the course of this book.
I thought he killed a couple people in the course of the book.
Well, so he kills one guy for the exact reason we're talking about. Well, no, he kills him over the escape, right? And
Yeah,
then he would have killed the other guys to avenge his friend, but his other friends took care of it first.
yeah,
I was
yeah.
so crushed when that
There's a lot of
escape
death.
didn't work.
Yeah, that was like the worst one. There was
Yeah.
that. I think that one had the most preparation.
Mhm. He was
Probably
gonna be
the
really good.
part that like, yeah, the part that definitely struck me the hardest was his last escape, which is
Mm.
he succeeds
The quicksand
essentially.
moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sylvan. So he escapes with Sylvan,
Mhm.
and Sylvan dies in the quicksand when they
Yeah.
reach land. They reached land and they were told, stay on your raft because there's going to be all the quicksand. So stay on your raft and give it another like 48, like 24 to 48 hours, and the tide will come in and it'll carry you over the quicksand and you'll be fine. And they reach the quicksand and Sylvan gets off his raft
Mhm.
and Henri watches him die in the quicksand. And
Yep.
it's horrifying to me. I was so disturbed by that, which is wild because I wasn't that disturbed by like the rest of it. I think on an
Mhm.
intellectual level, I was disturbed by a lot of things in this book, but
Yeah.
that was like that one hit me, and I'm
It
not
was gut
sure
wrenching.
like,
Yeah.
why. It was just that was the worst part of the whole
I
book.
think it's because that you could really feel the desperation in his writing there. Like he's like they were too far apart, so he couldn't yell to Sylvain to stay on the raft. So he was
Yeah,
like trying to pull himself closer and like yell to him, but he couldn't hear him.
yeah,
And
and then
so it
as
was a
the tide is coming in, he's
yeah,
getting closer to Sylvan, but Sylvan is going deeper into the quicksand because the tide's coming in. So
so,
it's getting him closer, but he knows that he's not going to make it. And I think you really feel that in the way that he describes the whole situation.
yeah. There's
Yeah,
just
there's
this
not a
like
lot of deaths that actually like that Henri really talks about, but that's one
mhm.
of them. And the other one is watching his friend's body be disposed of by
Oh
throwing it to the sharks. Those are
yeah.
the two deaths that he brings up and he talks about having nightmares about. And
Hmm.
I was like, I'm sure that he probably had a lot more nightmares than just about those ones, but those were the
Yeah.
two that stuck with him. And I was like, I absolutely understand both of those. Like why that would be those would be like the most traumatizing
Yeah,
ones.
because
Because he never
basically,
really figures out why Sylvain even got off raft. He doesn't know if
yeah,
it was because of sun exposure, like when they were traveling over the open ocean essentially for like 3 days,
yeah.
or if it was something else, if he like just went crazy for a second. Like he has no idea. He never understands why Sylvain
Hmm.
got off the raft. Like it was the one thing you were supposed to do was stay on your raft.
Yeah.
And he didn't. And they're never able to like have a conversation like at all. Just stare
No,
at each other while Savant dies.
there's no closure there. Yeah. And the shark thing, basically what happened is his friend was murdered, and that's the one that his other friends avenged for him. but then he was like, I
Mhm.
want to be there when they get rid of his body. And they tried really hard to like weigh it down so that it would like sink and the sharks wouldn't get him. But there were just literally so many sharks that they like carried the body
Uh-huh.
into to the surface. And
Yep.
he just watched his friend's body get torn apart by sharks.
Yep. Yeah.
And that is very disturbing.
It is. I guess maybe we should have put a warning at the beginning of this that it is a very disturbing book.
Maybe you'll have to put it on screen.
Yeah, I probably should.
Note to
Cause yeah,
self.
a lot of I mean it is a memoir about a guy who went to French Guiana as a prisoner to
Yeah.
a penal colony that no longer exists, predominantly because it was so horrific.
Yeah.
So it was the penal colony that he went to on the islands there, the Salvation Islands, they were a black mark upon the French government
Mhm.
during this time. They were something that France did not want to talk about and that they got flack from other countries because it was considered so inhumane the way
Yeah.
that they treated their prisoners that other countries would allow prisoners to escape to them
Mhm.
because they found it just
Distasteful. Yeah.
yeah that France did this to people. So it obviously it is very disturbing. It is very much like this was a harsh, horrible place to be. I can't remember exactly. I ended up looking more into Devil's Island and I found a video about it, but I read some up on it too. And it was like you were really, really lucky if you made it on the Salvation Islands for like 8 months to a year.
Yeah.
Because basically everybody just died within a few months, either from other prisoners or dysentery or yellow fever or like the plethora of horrible diseases that,
Mhm.
they did nothing about. So yeah, it was bad. And Henri, like just surviving this kind of treatment for so long is really impressive.
Yeah. I mean, he's ultimately pretty optimistic. Like
Yeah.
that's almost his superpower is like he has this resilience and this ability to be like, I'm just gonna escape. Like I don't know how I'm
Yeah.
gonna do it, but I'm just gonna do it again. Yeah, because the before the last escape, he definitely comes the closest to actually giving up. And like when he takes the last escape, they basically decide to jump off a cliff holding bags full of coconuts and like hope that that works. And I mean, yes, he did
Yeah.
a test run with a floating bag to see if it could actually like work a little bit, but there was a very real chance they were just gonna die.
Yes.
So he was pretty desperate there. But overall, the book is actually surprisingly. I mean, he basically is like he does condemn France for it. He's like,
Yep.
this is not part of being a civilized nation.
Yeah. And he's right. That treatment was awful. And I don't think anybody should have to go through those things.
Yeah,
Whether you're a criminal or not.
yeah.
I I don't know that that's really justifiable.
No, I mean, condemning people to years in solitary confinement is extreme, and they weren't even allowed outside. That's the other thing. Until this like doctor intervenes the second time he's back in solitary, they
Hmm.
weren't even allowed out of this. Like they were literally just sitting in these cells for years.
Yeah. Solitary is a horrible, horrible punishment. And I'm pretty sure most countries now do not allow solitary confinement for very long periods of time.
Yeah,
And they still
certainly
have
not
to like
years.
be let out.
Hmm.
And yeah. I did come across this one guy who survived solitary confinement for like 40 years. And I did not look into that anymore because I was like, I don't even want to know about this. I don't know. That's so disturbing.
Yeah, yeah. It was a lot. Yeah, and obviously Henri must have been pretty charming because pretty much everyone who meets him in this book helps him out. I mean, there are a couple
Yeah.
people who do betray him, but for the most part, like when he meets like civilians or even like guards and stuff, they're mostly like fine with him.
Yeah. I really wanted to hunt down like an interview or something. At one point in this book it's just him that he learned English and I
Mhm.
don't think he ever did. And I wish that he had cuz I could watch an interview with him or something where he
Yeah,
like I could actually understand what he's saying and then I don't know, get a feel for him. Because, like, he had to have been super charismatic.
Yeah.
Because everybody, like you said, everybody just kind of, like, falls at his feet, essentially. And I don't know if that has more to do with being in the French underworld or
Hmm.
not, but he meets up with people who are like from different countries and stuff who probably wouldn't know anything about him
Yeah.
necessarily. And they still are just like incredibly kind and generous to him, which he does talk about being extremely grateful for. So
Hmm.
I did appreciate that he puts that in there, but
And
he
he
must
does
have a very magnetic, what is the word? Magnanimous?
mag-
Magnetic personality?
magnetic. Yeah.
Magnanimous? Whatever.
Yeah.
He's got a
Well,
great
because
personality.
he's definitely not very intimidating, and he also seems to be like making it a point to be polite in a lot of his interactions. Which is funny. It is this sort of. It's kind of common in French books that I found of like people who are either poor or imprisoned or something, that they like have this nobility and like this dignity of like, even though I'm in this state, like I'm not going to lower the way that I treat others, and like
Huh.
that kind of thing.
The French way, I guess.
It's the French way. I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking specifically of Les Mis right there, but
Oh,
um,
okay.
yeah, it's so there is a lot of him like insisting on paying people for helping him and then them being like no, and like like these
Hmm.
weird where you're like you wouldn't think that these exchanges would be happening, but that's what's happening.
Yeah.
People are
Yeah.
like, no, just take this food and these supplies, and
Yeah. But, he won't.
you won't.
He seems to really try to do the right thing. There are a couple times where he, like, lies to somebody to
Hmm.
get what he wants, and then the person helps him, and, like, it doesn't necessarily turn out bad for that person or anything.
No.
He didn't, like, super hyper cheat them out of something. But then he always, like, feels bad about doing
Yeah.
that. And I was like, I don't know if you actually feel bad or if you're just putting that in there because
Like in
you
retrospect.
should. Because yeah, because he is a criminal. Henri Charrier is not somebody that I would say like is a good person. Like
Yeah.
this is his memoir, and he's like always very like I guess as good as possible in here. But then
Hmm.
I do also kind of wonder, is that 100% accurate?
Yeah.
Because he does kill a couple people without really that much thought. Like he avoids killing people, but when
Hmm.
he's like, well, that's the only option, so I gotta do it, and he's fine with it. Like it does not weigh upon his conscience.
No, he does also pretend to be religious at various points, even though he's definitely not.
That was very an interesting aspect because that really comes out a lot in like the last third,
Hmm.
and it's very funny to me because he has a very standard view of God, which is that when things are going his way, God is doing great things, and when things are not going his way, God is horrible and he hates him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, like he does not have any kind of developed theology, even
Yeah.
a little bit.
Hmm.
It's just when things are happening, he agrees with. He's like, God is good. He really does care
Hmm.
about me. But when anything goes wrong, he's like, God sucks.
I've been abandoned. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, you're a career criminal.
Yeah.
What do you expect?
And he has actually mostly positive interactions with religious people in the book. He does run into
Yeah.
some nuns, and one of them does turn him into the police. But the other
Yeah.
ones tried really hard to help him, so it kind of like evens
Yeah.
out. So it feels like he is interested in religion, but then doesn't really like commit to it. Uh,
Yeah.
so he
Well, if
definitely
he
doesn't have
committed
like,
to it,
yeah, he doesn't have
if he
defined morals.
yeah, if he committed to religion, he would have to define his morals, and I don't think he really ever wanted to do that.
Yeah, because like you can't explain some of his decisions. That's what you said. He's not necessarily being a good person throughout this entire book.
Yeah.
He's doing okay for the circumstances, maybe, but
Yeah, he's somebody that I would have probably appreciated meeting, but I
mm,
would not have wanted that meeting to be on his terms.
yeah.
Not that I think that he's not the kind of person that would just like knife someone, but
Hmm.
like he's very much somebody who always wanted to be in control. And I guess that makes a lot of sense because he was not in control of most of his life in
Yeah.
this book. Like the things that he did have control over, he like clung to,
Mm-hmm.
which obviously that like I said, it makes sense because he didn't have a lot of control outside of his life.
Yeah. And he was so smart too that like it seems like a shame sometimes. Because I was thinking about the escapes that he pulls off and stuff, and I'm like, it took so much thought and so many like creative ideas for him to
Hmm.
even come up with a way to make this work.
Yes,
And
months and months of planning and like watching and like learning and gathering information about
Mhm.
guards and other prisoners and, testing the waters to see who he could trust and who he couldn't.
Mhm. And he did a good job of it. I mean, he pulls off several prison escapes. So
Yes. Yeah. So there are two movies that were made from this book. And I watched the trailers for both of them. I don't know if you
I
made
did
that
not.
effort or not.
So.
Okay. They both seem extremely inaccurate to the to the book. The thing is that
That's.
like there's so many characters and there's so many people in these
Mhm.
books, and actually I did read that the character Degas might actually like not have existed, that he was actually like a mashup of several characters.
Oh.
And I was like, that actually makes a lot of sense considering the first time we meet Degas, he is like extremely vulnerable
Mhm.
in his prison. And he basically comes to Papillon to ask for protection
Mhm.
in exchange for money. And then
Yeah.
he gives Papillon all his money, and then that's about it for a little while. And
Yeah.
Papillon like saves his life at least once or twice.
Mhm.
And then you don't see him for like a really long time, and then he
Yeah.
just
It
kind of
just
like
disappears.
shows up in a couple of places.
Mhm.
And both of the trailers that I watched, the one for the movie in the 1970, I think it was 1970,
Yeah.
and the more recent one, which I cannot remember what year, I guess 2018 or after. Both of them make it look like he and Degas sort of like stuck together like
Mhm.
for a long time, and that they like worked together, and Papillon really really protected Degas for like long periods of time, and like they were like buddy buddy.
Mhm.
An interesting decision because you could have done the same thing but had it be Maturette and it would have been more accurate.
Yeah. Because
Because
he spends a lot of time in the book on the first escape, so you feel like you get to know Maturette and Clouseau better.
yeah,
But then Clouseau unfortunately dies after solitary.
yes,
So yeah, but they show up a lot more consistently, and their characters are more consistent than Degas, I would say.
yeah. But if Degas truly is like a mashup of different people, then it makes a lot of sense as to
Mhm.
why. Whereas Matrat and Clusio would be just they are their own people. It's also hard to keep track of the characters at times. Those are probably the only three that I really kept track of. And the
Yeah.
only reason that I kept track of Degas was because they mentioned that he wears glasses, and Rami Malek on the cover of this book is wearing glasses. And so I
Mhm.
was like, okay, that's Degas. Then that's it. That's the only reason I kept track of him was because I was like, oh, he's gonna be important. And then he really he was, but he
He
also
was.
kind of wasn't. He's very like a background kind of person by the time
Yeah.
you get to like the Salvation Islands because he does help out. He helps Papillon a lot in Solitary the
Solitary. Yeah.
first time,
But
and then
obviously
he
he's
can't
not
help him the
there,
second time.
so
Yeah.
it's all
So
remote.
I don't know. I did not really have much interest in watching the movies.
No,
Uh, they were
I
both
don't.
hits, I guess. They both did well, but I don't know. There's so much in this book that I don't know from a like script perspective or like even a directing perspective how I would go about doing this. Probably
Exactly.
wouldn't do the whole book, honestly. I would
Just do
I mean I
one
wouldn't
escape.
plan yeah, I would just be like, yeah, it's just part of the book.
Mhm.
Which I think would have been fine. Even
Yeah.
if it had been the second half of the book, you
Yeah.
know?
I feel like maybe those movies would be enjoyable, but I do agree that I don't have a strong feeling. I mean, that's why I didn't watch the trailers either, because I was just like, eh. maybe if I was bored someday, I would watch it. But
Yeah, I was trying to hunt down an interview with Henri and
mm.
just see, but the only ones I could find were in French,
So he also died before those movies came
obviously.
out.
He consulted. He was on the set for the first one.
Oh, okay. But did
Yeah,
he
so the
see it
one
come
that was in
out?
1970. Yeah, I think he did.
Oh,
Because he
okay.
died in 1973,
Right.
I think. Right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yep.
he died in 1973, and I'm pretty sure the movie came out in 1970.
Huh.
Because this book was a runaway success when he published
Yeah.
it in 1968. It sold a lot very quickly. So they decided to make
I
a movie
mean,
of it pretty
that
fast.
video you sent, I didn't say that the prison on Devil's Island didn't close until the 1950s. I think it did.
Um,
So
maybe I can't remember.
I feel like we it feels like in this book things are taking place way in the past because it was like World War II time. But
Yeah, it closed down in 1953.
yeah, like that's not really that long ago for France to have been sending people to an island where most of them died.
Yes. Yep.
So
It was absolutely horrible.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
I read a lot about this camp and stuff. It's very
about it,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you would have survived?
No, I would have died way before that. What are you asking me? Could I have survived? Are you kidding me, Charlotte?
Well,
I barely survived now.
I already said that I don't think I would have been able to plan these escapes. I really have no idea. This would be pure speculation on how I would do. Like, I don't.
Yeah,
If I was in solitary confinement, how would I do? I have no idea. He
I
literally didn't
agree.
even. They didn't even give him like books. He had nothing.
Oh,
He had
yeah, you
centipedes
get
for
absolutely
friends.
nothing. Yep. The
Yeah,
screams of his fellow prisoners when they died
yeah.
or went insane. Yeah, I don't commit crimes, Charlotte, for
No,
a
I
very
mean
good
me
reason.
neither. That is the strategy. Is just don't never be in the situation.
Yeah. Well, he clearly knew a lot about survival beforehand because he
Yeah.
survives in the bush. He's like, I meant to look
He was
up
in the Navy, wasn't he?
where
Because
is.
he
Yeah, he
mentions
was.
being in the Navy because that's how he knows how to sail like rafts and stuff, and that's his job as the escape artist the first time around.
Yeah. I meant to look up where French Guiana is. It is in
Isn't
South
it?
America.
Yeah, I was gonna say because they went to Colombia, so it has to be.
Yeah, and he ends up in Venezuela. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I could not have survived in South America. I don't know how he did since he was born and bred in France.
He was
But
high on
yeah.
cocaine for part of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
as you
his
do.
his escape from Colombian prison, he is just chewing on cocaine leaves.
Yep. It's a good time. It kept him going.
It
Yeah, he
did.
was in the Navy. I can't remember. I didn't look up. I feel like I spent a lot of time looking up information
Mm.
about Henri Charrier, and I feel like I did not learn that much. Like apart from this book, there's very little. There's just little about him,
Well, I mean, the
and I
book
don't
was
know
only
why I couldn't find
published,
it. Oh,
yeah, not that far before he died, so there wasn't a lot of time for people to like interview him or.
yeah, it was 5 years. If this had been today, if he had published it today, and then it was a runaway success, he would have had so many interviews
Mm-hmm.
with so many people, and it would have been great because then I would have been able to actually do that. Naval discipline and culture did not suit Charrier, however, and he evaded further service by amputating his own thumb.
Wow,
He did
that
not
never
like
comes
being in
up.
the Navy. Yeah, this is from the back of the book. The
Oh,
Way of the Warrior by Howard Marks, author of Mr. Nice, an autobiography. So it's just a little more information about Henri.
interesting.
Yeah, he moved to Paris and soon became respected and popular among the city's notorious underworld of safecrackers, thieves, and prostitutes.
Hmm.
And then he was arrested in 1930.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
So he
and
was in the Navy. So he learned a lot because he learned how to sail, and then
mhm.
he sailed a decent amount. That saved his
he
life a
he
couple of
does
times.
mention he mentions at one point that he learned to navigate from that first escape with just the
Yeah.
sky because obviously in the Navy he had maps and stuff.
Yeah. He never mentions not having a thumb, though.
No, he doesn't. That's what I was saying. That never comes up. He doesn't
No, that's
describe
wild.
himself very much other than the tattoo.
Yes. That's where he
Um,
got his name. Papillon is French for butterfly, and he has a tattoo of a butterfly on his chest. And nothing else is said about that. It's not said why he has a tattoo of a butterfly. It's not said
no,
why he decided that. He just has a tattoo of a butterfly, and that's how he got his nickname. Which is funny because he also has a tattoo of a tiger. That's not his nickname.
nope,
The
just the
butterfly.
butterfly. Probably the butterfly is more unique among prisoners.
Probably.
How did you feel about his stint with the natives in Colombia?
Um, I don't know. I didn't feel anything about it besides the fact that he probably should have stayed there.
Yeah, he could have avoided like 7 more years in prison.
Yeah, which he mentions
Mm,
when he talks about how he left, and he was like, "I probably shouldn't have done that." And I was like, "Yeah, you shouldn't have. You could have." He ends up in Colombia with some natives, and they that are known for like murdering everybody who comes across their path. But
yeah.
they take him in for whatever reason, and he lives there for like 7 months, and he just has a grand old time. Gets a couple of wives.
Mhm.
He leaves them when they're both pregnant,
Yep.
and he just never goes back. He talks about going back. Like he
Yeah.
really dwells on that time of his life when he's in solitary and stuff. It's like what keeps him sane.
Mhm.
But it's so funny to me that he left them
Yeah.
when it's like he could have literally just stayed and he could have lived out the rest of his life there and it would have been fine. He was
Mhm.
fully accepted by the tribe. He had a great thing going for himself and he just decided to leave because he was like, "Oh, I want to re-enter society."
Yeah,
And I
and
was like,
that's what made me
"What
mad.
society?
Exactly. I was like, they
What
have
has
a
society done for
society.
you?"
Mhm. You weren't thriving in the other one.
No. So he leaves and is immediately caught and sent
Yep.
back. So,
Yeah. And he never like it's unclear. The ending was a little frustrating to me because he doesn't really even give you any brief details about the rest of his life. I mean, he says he has lots of
no.
more adventures and whatever, but I'm
Yeah.
like, did you ever even go back and like meet your children or did you just kind of give up on that? Like I really can't tell.
Yeah, I have no idea. Because he marries a woman in Venezuela and they have a kid together.
Mhm.
And that's it. That's the only thing that, like, I know about him
But he
beyond
left
that.
Lali and Zarema in
Yeah.
Colombia
Yep.
and broke their hearts. They were very sad. They almost committed suicide, really.
Yeah.
They like stop eating and stuff when they figure out that he's going to leave and they're pregnant.
Yep.
And then he cries and it magically fixes it.
Yep. It
I
does.
was kind of angry at that I was like, wow.
Yeah. He had such a good life there. And then he just leaves it because he wants to re enter society. And I was like, I don't know why.
Yeah.
It just made me so mad because it was like literally society has done nothing for him. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, he doesn't have like the luxuries that he probably would have wanted, but like that's it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like he had really any friends that he's going back to. He
And he
didn't
could have
have, a job to go back to. He had the French
yeah.
underworld, which he couldn't go back to France anyway.
He couldn't have gotten back to France, and then he also like could have gotten more luxuries because he tattoos the one tribal chief, and they really like it, and then a different chief has also wants the tattoo, and they were gonna trade him stuff. Like they were gonna like they end up giving
Yeah.
him a horse, but he probably could have gotten pretty much whatever he wanted if he just kept doing that.
Yep.
Just be a tattoo artist. But no, and it just felt very judgmental as well of him. Like it, I mean, obviously he comes from a different culture, and like there is that cultural clash of not understanding their language or
Mhm.
anything. Um,
Yeah.
but it just definitely felt like he was just like, well, this isn't a society.
Yeah. He just felt like it wasn't like he was better than it.
Mm-hmm.
The society when they like took him in when they could have just murdered him on the spot,
Yeah.
which apparently they did to many people. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't appreciate his attitude
Nope. And
or that
yeah,
he
and then we
decided to
were
just leave.
also that's when we first realized that we were like, didn't he mention having a wife before? And then now he's just like totally okay with sleeping with these two women and
Yep.
let's
Yeah, like I said, he's not a good person.
no.
And it's so weird because, like, yeah, he mentions his wife and he never mentions her again the whole book.
Hmm.
And, like, retrospect, we know that it was his ex-wife. But it's like, he
But
just
as a
never
reader,
thinks about her.
hmm
Ever. And anytime he thinks about, like, his family, he thinks about, like, his dad. And
yep.
I'm like, okay, like, what about, like, your literal wife?
Mhm.
What about her? The woman you pledged to spend the rest of your life together with. And you just, nope, it's fine.
Doesn't count.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the way it felt.
yeah. The one other thing that I thought was interesting in this book is that even though it's taking place during World War II, nothing that political really comes up because
No.
like every once in a while there's like rule changes or like things that are affected, but like they're in such a bubble being in the prison that they really don't even know fully what's going on. And I'm like, that would be kind of weird. Like
Yeah.
you're just totally removed from it.
Yes. It just does not affect his life that much to have
Mm-hmm.
a war going on. Except that if you escape, you're considered a traitor.
Yeah.
Instead of like getting other punishments, they'll just kill you.
Yeah. But like we said, by the time of his last escape, he was desperate enough he didn't really care if he died anyway, so
Yes.
well, I wouldn't say he didn't care if he died, but he was willing to risk it, so
Yeah. Yeah, he talks about being fairly close to suicide a couple of times.
hmm.
And yeah,
Uh,
I mean, same if I'd been in that situation. I feel like
when
it'd be pretty close at times.
when he broke both of the arches in his feet,
Mhm.
I was like, what is he gonna do now? Uh, but he gets over it.
Yeah, he does. He's over a
So,
lot of things.
what did you rate this book? We didn't talk about that.
Shoot, I don't even remember. Hang
What?
on. Let me hop on my Goodreads.
You don't even remember?
I'm pretty sure I already wrote my review for it.
Wow.
So, you know,
You rated it something.
I did. Give me a second. My internet's working on it. I have a lot of tabs open. Okay.
Relatable.
My rating was 3 stars.
Solid 3.
Yep, solid 3.
You're average.
Yep, that's that pretty much is my average.
I think I gave it 3.5.
Yeah, I can't give
I
half
mean,
stars.
oh right. I see, and I think I would have leaned toward 4 then though, because I liked it quite a bit. I mean, I wouldn't reread it. Like a 5-star book, I would reread. Basically, is how
Yeah.
I distinguish it. But I thought it was really unique, and I haven't read a lot of memoirs. Um,
Mhm.
but I tend to think of it as kind of a boring genre, and this definitely wasn't boring. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think it was boring either, even though I did have a really hard time getting through it. I think for nonfiction, for me, it was pretty good. I thought it was interesting and very like bare bones,
yeah.
like very detached, which was fine because it kind of made it a little quicker to read because there's
Hmm.
not a lot of description. It also made it a little harder to follow though,
Yeah.
because I never really felt like he wasn't trying to like put the reader there with him. He
Hmm.
was just telling you what happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean 3 stars is solid for me.
Yeah.
I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I probably won't read it again.
Would you recommend it to people?
Um, yeah, but I would have to know a decent amount about a person to recommend it.
Yeah.
Like it would have to be like, I am looking for a memoir about prison. I'd be like, do I have the one for you?
uh, also, just a side note, because I need to mention this before we end the podcast. I loved the whole thing with the buffalo.
Oh
It
yeah,
was
that was pretty good.
the weirdest side story. Like he just ends up
It
getting put in
was.
charge of taking care of this buffalo, and he like becomes so invested in this buffalo's life, and like this buffalo has a girlfriend, and he like
Uh-huh.
lets the buffalo fight off another buffalo who wants to win over
Uh-huh.
his girl. And I was just like, I don't know why he felt like he needed to include this in this book, but I am glad it's here.
Yeah, I mean it was fine.
Was not one of your favorite parts, Corrie?
No, I don't know if I'd really say I have a super favorite part of this. There's just different parts that are more or less disturbing than the last parts.
That's true. It was all pretty disturbing, but I liked that part.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
shout out.
Of
What
course
was his
you would.
name? Bruno.
Yeah. Bruno
Yeah.
the Buffalo. Of course you would like the buffalo.
I know it wasn't a bison, but it made me happy anyway.
Yeah. Well, any closing thoughts on it besides that? I guess that was your closing thought.
That was my closing thought.
I guess I don't really have any closing thoughts.
Don't go to
I
prison,
thought it was,
kids.
yeah, don't do things that would get you sent to prison. Next month we're reading a much lighter novel. Well, that we are speaking in and recording in right now. But the next book that we are going to read will be Insignia by S.J. Kincaid. And I pick, and I picked it. I never even read the back of this book, but I picked it because I really liked another book by S.J. Kincaid,
Oh.
and I liked, yeah, because she wrote The Diabolic, and I
Oh.
really, really liked that book. I liked
I
that book
never read it,
so
but I
much.
remember you talking about it.
Yeah, and then I read the second book in the trilogy, and I did not like it
Oh.
at all. So I'm skeptical about
Great.
Insignia, but I had decided that I was going to read it forever ago. So
For
stuck with it now.
for a second I thought you were gonna say you really like the color red.
No.
And I was like, yeah, that's a reason to buy
Uh
this book.
yeah. So hopefully this book is really good and I will be happy with it. Because if it's really good, this is also I think a trilogy and I'm probably not going to read the rest of it because I'm too skeptical about the author now. She scares me
All right. Well,
because I
I guess
hated
we'll
the second
see.
book in that trilogy.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. But if you want to read with us for or read the book and then listen to us talk about it because we don't have anywhere that we can share like updates or anything, then Insignia by Jay Kincaid is the next one on our list.
How do we normally end?
Just long silence. Really just say bye. All right, guys.
Bye.
Like, comment, tell us what books you're reading, and all that good stuff. Nobody listens to this anyway. Just do it for fun. All right. We'll see you guys next month. Bye.
Bye.